Let's do this.
Shall we start off and then count, or should we?
Yeah, let's do it.
One.
No.
Wait.
Okay.
Sorry. One more.
Let's do it.
1, 2,
3, 4.
I declare a thumb war.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Oh, I did not. That was all improvised.
Tom, be honest.
That was improvised.
Tom,
It was improvised.
I've been saying that since I was a kid.
No, improvised. I'm not saying we made it
Okay,
up.
okay.
What I'm saying
Let's
is,
get this party started.
What I'm saying
Yeah, we get it.
is that we didn't plan that ahead of time.
Yes.
We just started kind of moving into it. Before you know it, we're
Well,
doing the
most
thumb war.
thumb wars are kind of improvised in that sense. You don't plan, meet me behind the alley in an hour.
That's not true. I definitely did. I definitely met people to do thumb wars. I never said, guys, let's have a thumb war tournament when I was younger.
Okay.
You never did?
Well, it was mostly like, hey, we're bored. You know?
Well, yeah. I'm not saying we planned it for like next Thursday.
That's what I'm saying.
I'm just saying that
Yeah.
that it was like planned in the sense that we're like, hey, you guys want to do a thumb war tournament?
That seems unplanned. That little comment seems unplanned. Hey, guys, want to do this? That seems fairly unplanned.
Wasn't everything unplanned when you were in like fourth grade to
Pretty
a degree?
much.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
In that way?
Everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what my point is it didn't just spontaneously happen. Like it was a thing
Like
where
most
I'd
thumb wars. That's my point.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, baby.
Okay.
You feeling good?
I'm really tired.
Hey, Matt,
wait.
can you check that off the list? Things we wanted to get
Are
to
you
today.
tired?
You know, I'm feeling okay. I've got the coffee. I'm feeling okay.
You feeling okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a little lull earlier, but
Really? Why?
Yeah. I think it might have been something that was something I ate.
Oh, yeah?
Chicken sandwich. That
Chicken. Does that make you sleep?
might have been laced. Might have been laced.
How long were you sleeping before you came here?
I have no idea.
You don't know?
I know I went down, and it was one of those moments where you don't remember falling asleep, and all of a sudden you're up, and you, where am I?
I know that feeling. I had that yesterday before I came here to teach because I was really tired. I was falling asleep while driving.
You were
Not really falling asleep, but you know when you're like, oh, I feel like I could like fall asleep
Yep.
right now. I wasn't, but then I went home. I sat on my couch, and next thing I know, my alarm's going off to come here to.
The amazing thing about
teach.
you is that you can tell your body no. When it says it's time to sleep, you can say, no, I'm watching a movie. No, thank you. I'll stay awake now. For me, I'm like, my body's like, it's time to sleep. And I'm like, if you say so. I just paid $10 for this movie, but I guess I have to sleep now. I can't say no.
Yeah,
I've fallen asleep 20-30% of the movie theaters that I've gone to.
I know that. I've seen that.
Yeah. I've slept on your arm.
That's true. That's very true. More than once.
Yes. Yep.
I do recall one time going to a movie when you were sleeping on my arm and Daniela was sleeping with her head on your lap.
That was Hugo, the train station movie.
No, I didn't go to watch it. I watched that at home on like Netflix.
Yeah, I fell asleep. Okay.
Okay.
Well, as always, every week, for the foreseeable future,
Yeah.
should the Lord tarry,
Yes.
we're getting together to respond to questions that come up as you teach through the Bible in a specific book out of the 66 books written by 40 different authors named Revelation.
Yes.
So you are teaching through Revelation, and last night you taught.
Yes.
Today, Tom, the people have questions.
Yes. Let's
This
do
is
it.
the segment of our show where the people have questions.
Very good.
So, do you want to give it a shot?
Let's do it.
How you feeling?
I'm feeling good.
Okay.
Yeah.
First question,
Okay.
and there will be a couple bonus questions because last week you were at the Oregon coast, and so we weren't able to film.
Nope.
No.
I was here.
Okay.
You were here.
I was here and you were here.
Wait, why weren't we able to film? Somebody was at the Oregon coast.
It was Matt.
That's right. It was Matt. Matt's raising his hand.
Matt
over
was
here,
at the Oregon coast.
Matt's
Yeah.
raising his hand.
Yeah.
Matt was at the Oregon coast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love how all of the podcast producer characters that live in the shadows, they could be fictional. Like, maybe there's not a Matt. You and I just want to break, and we're like, let's send Matt to the Oregon coast. So hope you enjoyed the time, Matt. Oh, wow. That's great. Well, we have our first question from Luke.
Yep.
Love Luke. This could be a number of different Lukes.
It could be.
Yeah.
I do know quite a few Lukes too.
Well, we have some great friends named Luke.
Correct.
He says, you mentioned the beast is Rome.
Yep.
Do you mean time in the past, or will Rome rise again?
Okay.
Great question.
That's a really good question.
First,
Yes.
short reasoning behind why you say the beast is Rome.
Okay,
because
so-
that was a lot of. I mean, you could talk about this for an hour, literally.
Yeah, I know, and I did yesterday. So you can
About 50
go back
minutes.
and watch the
About
video.
50 minutes
Yeah.
was dedicated to this. So from 50 minutes down to 1 minute in what the movie world calls a synopsis.
Yes, and also English teachers call them synopses.
Well, let's stick it with what you know.
Well, I'm an English teacher.
Okay, but you love movies.
That's right, I do
Okay.
love movies.
Okay. So give us the synopsis behind this question.
Yes, okay, so we read last night Revelation chapter 12. And in Revelation chapter 12, we read about a beast that came up from the sea. It had 7 heads. It had 10 horns. And the futurist dispensationalist, which is the perspective that would be most common, certainly to members at Calvary Chapel, but probably in most American churches, I would say, at least evangelical American churches, the tendency is to interpret the beast as the Antichrist. That is, as a human who is going to appear on the scene someday on the planet Earth, who is going to, in a sense, kind of be the opposite of Jesus. He's going to come and be a false Christ that people are going to come and believe to be the Messiah. And they're going to fall down at his feet and worship him and all of that kind of stuff in place of Jesus, so the Antichrist.
And if you asked most people going into a Revelation study to give a few interpretations, the beast as the Antichrist would have been the easiest one on the question.
Yeah, that would be
That's
one thing that, like,
that's like
everybody-
Revelation 101 in our time.
For sure. If I gave a little quiz,
And they're
out
like,
to
"What do you
everybody,
guys think?"
Yeah, who's the beast?
Most people would be
but
like,
the Antichrist.
Well, that
Yeah.
one's easy, actually.
Yeah.
And then last night, you kind of shocked the world.
It was one of those provocateur
Yeah.
type statements, like it was a provocation.
We'll have to review the tape with Matt's help, but there was a little bit of that gasp when it was said.
Was there?
Yeah, it was
I didn't hear the gasp.
Here we go.
Oh, yeah.
Metaphoric. Symbol.
Anyway, I did say that I think the beast is Rome, and then I proceeded to mostly spend yesterday giving an argument that demonstrates why the beast, I think, needs to be a nation or an empire. And I did that by comparing it to the beasts of the book of Daniel, which, to be fair, I certainly am willing to grant that maybe the principle doesn't hold entirely, which is why I acknowledge I could be wrong on this. I did not give a lot of reasons, however, why I thought the beast in particular is Rome. And I just gave an argument for why I think it's an empire.
A principle of interpretation.
Exactly. Now, here's the thing. The reason why I think it's Rome is going to really come clear in chapter 17. Revelation chapter 17 is why I think it's Rome. However, I didn't mention this yesterday. It is possible that the beast of 17 is different from this beast. And so I just need to be kind of clear on that there could potentially be a difference. So having said that, I could be wrong. And I'm willing to acknowledge that I could be wrong. But that's fundamentally what I believe. Now, having said that, let's say that the beast is Rome, as I asserted. Did I mean that it is referencing a time in the past, or will Rome rise again?
Because this would be, if it's time of the past, that would be preterist.
Yes.
Beast is Rome.
Correct.
That's said and done.
Correct.
Move on with
Correct.
with your
Yes.
anticipations.
Yes. And now, by the way, the passages that we're going to be coming to as we go through Revelation so clearly, like so undeniably clearly, are talking about Rome, that it has led many futurists to argue that there will be a future revived Roman Empire. Here's my thought on that. That is possible. I'm willing to grant that that's a possibility. I do not think that is likely. I do not think it is likely that there will be another future Roman Empire for a million reasons. People will often try to associate certain things that go on in Europe today as a new Roman Empire. But whatever comes now just won't be a Roman. I don't know if you know this. There was a new Roman Empire, a revived Roman Empire. And anybody who studies it just goes, well, that's just not the Roman Empire. It's just fundamentally different. You know what it was? They actually called it, like, the ruler was trying to put it himself off as a new Roman emperor.
Napoleon?
No. Well, that's not really true. Napoleon actually he didn't call his empire Rome. However, he modeled his imperial authority and power off of the old Roman Empire. And he made the offices of his empire mirror the old Roman offices. So I mean, his was the French Empire, and he would have called it the French Empire. But no, it was Mussolini in World War II. Mussolini, of course, ruling from Rome, he wanted to have like a revived Roman Empire. But the fascist dictatorship of Mussolini just was so fundamentally different. It also was weak and failed to do anything. his initial attempt at conquest to kind of spread his empire was to go into North Africa, which under the old Roman Empire, much of North Africa was under the control of the Romans. He lost. Like, he failed. He was ineffective. The Italians were ineffective. And it wasn't until Hitler came along and buoyed him that he really started to actually see some victories. So, all that to say, are there European states? Yes. Are there European, you have the European Union, it's a confederacy. Is that significant? Yes. Does it matter in terms of like world politics?
And will the power seat be Rome? Doesn't appear
to be. Italy is a weak player.
Yeah.
The powers in Europe. The power in Europe is Germany. It's Germany.
Yeah.
There's no getting around. There's nobody who's even close. France is the second closest, and they're not.
So what about someone who would say there is something in Rome that is a seat of power, the Vatican City?
And that's another place. Now, by the way, when you look at church history, there has been a lot of connecting the Vatican and the Roman Catholic Church to many of the prophecies in the book of Revelation, not in a good way.
Right.
In fact, I brought this up at the start of our studies that the traditional interpretation of Revelation throughout most of church history is the historicist interpretation. And the Protestant reformers, Luther, Calvin, all those guys, they interpreted the book of Revelation as all being about the Roman Catholic Church. They believed all the passages we're about to get to that talk about Rome, that's actually warnings and prophecies against the papacy, that is the Pope and his authority, and the Roman Catholic Church. They really go after that.
And you hear that now, some looking at the Pope as maybe, some sort of relation to a beast
figure. A lot of futurist dispensationalists will equate the Pope and the papacy with the beast of Revelation and things like that, for sure. And that plays right in the tradition of what Luther, Calvin, all those guys, they all referred to the Pope as the Antichrist. That was actually their assertion fundamentally. So Catholics not big fans of that interpretation. By the way, and this is what I was about to say a few moments ago when I said I brought this up at the start of the study, meaning like back in our first few episodes, our first few studies in Revelation. That is that the preterist view was first put forward by Catholic priests who were arguing against the Protestant historicist view. They were actually saying, no, we actually want to ground this more in the context of when the book was written. And they were actually the earliest preterists were actually Catholics, although it went on to become, in the last 100 years, far more a Protestant view. Preterists, like the views I'm giving are Protestant views, not specifically Catholic views, even though it was a couple of Jesuit priests who first kind of posited the idea of preterism, but Protestants have run with it. So all this to say, I think both of those interpretations are possible, for sure. Like, it could be speaking of the papacy. It could be speaking of the Roman Catholic Church. It could be speaking of some kind of future European empire. I'm not inclined to think that's true, though. I'm inclined to think that a lot of what we're going to be reading in the next few chapters are about the Roman Empire in John's day. And what that does, now, again, I want to remind everybody that as we've been going through the book of Revelation, I'm non-committal on the book as a whole. But I see certain parts as very clearly fitting.
Every camp has their weak and strong points.
Yeah, and here's where it's funny. Most preterists want to interpret all of the book of Revelation as applying to 70 AD. I have a hard time with that. I don't see a lot in the book of Revelation that strikes me as referencing the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD.
70 AD fits much nicer in Matthew 24.
Matthew 24 and Luke 21 for sure, not the book of Revelation. However, the book of Revelation really does, to me, through many chapters, seem to be referencing the Roman Empire of John's day, who, if you guys recall, the Roman Empire in John's day was persecuting these believers, and a lot of the letter is about the ultimate fall of the imperial power itself to show God's superiority over that power. That's what I was kind of trying to draw connections to in the book of Daniel. Is in the book of Daniel, Daniel's sitting there, he's under Persian authority, and he's basically like going, Lord, when is this all going to end? And the message is, it will end. And so when we went through that history, going through Persia, Alexander the Great, and then the division of Alexander's empire all the way down to Antiochus IV, that whole story is a story where God's saying, you're going to get your independence back, which is what happens. The Maccabees gain their independence, right? So that's like the final conquest of the enemy of Antiochus IV. Right? So my inclination is to think this beast in Rome is from the past. In which case, it's a kind of preterist view. It's not the 70 AD preterist view, but it is a kind of preterist view.
And in some ways, it's a stay tuned as we get to Revelation 17.
Exactly.
There may be some more interpretations that your traditional view of the beast might answer.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, well, let's move on with a similar train of thought. Is the beast from the bottomless pit that kills the two witnesses the same beast with the horns?
Correct.
A kingdom rather than the Antichrist?
Okay, yes. So here's what I would say. This question I actually thought about pretty extensively even before I taught it, and I really didn't address it because I didn't know. So it's like when I was teaching, I was like, I'm not really sure. But this is referencing the previous chapter when it says that the two witnesses will fight with the beast from the bottomless pit. That's all it says, the beast from the bottomless pit, which is weird because the previous chapter, it does talk about the bottomless pit, but it doesn't really mention a beast, right? It talks about the locusts that come out of the pit, and then it talks about the leader of the king of the locust, and it talks about Abaddon the destroyer, but it didn't describe Abaddon necessarily as a beast the way that this latter character is. So my question then is when it says the beast from the bottomless pit, does it just mean Abaddon? Which I'm inclined to think it is. And my inclination is to think of those locusts as being demonic, right? Not nations. My inclination is to think of Abaddon as being demonic, or, and this is tough, and it would make this verse not make a lot of sense. It could be a personification, if you know what I mean. Like, if he's Abaddon the destroyer, what that means he is the personification of the fact of destruction that is coming in.
Well, you mentioned that as we went through it as a potential reading of what Abaddon character was getting at.
Yeah. Now, I do want to say I've seen commentators who say that the beast fought by the two witnesses is the beast of chapter 13 and came out of the bottomless pit. But that still doesn't make much sense because 13, it talks about the beast arising from the sea. So to me, it strikes me as different. And it's an odd choice of words because it didn't use the word beast in the previous, when describing the locust coming from the bottomless pit, but I could be wrong on that. That's kind of where I'm inclined.
Well, I think one thing that we can do is continually, as the study unfolds, shed light on some previous questions that may remain, and that's what Jeff is about to do here.
Yeah.
Jeff, what's up? Grateful
hey, Jeff.
that you've been coming, and faithful listener and
brings in a lot of questions.
A very inquisitive person.
Thank you.
Jeff, could you please explain maybe again Revelation 12, verse 11, especially the second part, they did not love their lives to the death. So maybe, pull up the verse, read it. And then the question is, after you explain this once again, is it good to not love your life? Is it good to not love your life?
Yeah. So this is talking about, from the previous chapter when it was talking about the war between the dragon and Michael and his archangels, or his angels, and the dragon and his angels, how the dragon is cast down. And then I made that point about how the book of Revelation seems to be telling parallel stories, a story of what's happening in heaven, which has an expression on earth. And in heaven, it's a war, Michael and the dragon fighting. But on earth, it looks very differently. Instead, it is a war, but it's not a physical war with weapons. It is the saints of God who are being persecuted, but they are overcoming. And how do they overcome? They overcome by staying faithful all the way to the end and never giving up, even to the point of death. That means that they're facing temptation. In this particular case, these are Christians who are being persecuted by Roman officials who are saying, sacrifice to the emperor. I'll just offer a bit of sacrifice to the emperor and we will not kill you. And so there's a temptation there. All I need to do is sacrifice and I'll keep living. And what it's saying is that they overcame this temptation. They overcame this pull to give up and to quit. And they overcame it, of course, by the blood of Christ, by the blood of the Lamb, and by the word of their testimony, right? And it says, and they did not love their lives to death, or to the death. So it's worded a little weirdly,
Mm-hmm.
but it's a really simple verse. What it's saying is that as they were facing persecution, the threat of death, they did not love their life so much that they were willing to give up on Christ and suffer. So in other words, a person who loves his life in that context, as opposed to loving Christ, like the idea is a comparison, right? It's like, I need
Save
to
your
choose,
life,
save my
lose it.
life. If I save my life, I renounce Christ. If I hold fast to Christ, I die. So the person who loves his life is the person who saves his life by renouncing Jesus. And therefore he lives.
Yep.
He lives. So this encouragement, the good thing is that they didn't love their life so much that they ultimately
if you change the word "did not love the life" to "they were selfless" or they were, willing to sacrifice unto death, it makes it what is trying to be communicated very clear. It's like we will not love ourselves, and we will love Christ more than we love ourselves, no matter what.
No matter what.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, there's some great Hebrews chapter 12 tells us that when Jesus went to the cross, he did so for the joy that was set before him. And the implication here is if Jesus had loved his life, he would have chosen not to go to the cross. But instead, he chose the joy that was set before him, and the joy that was set before him was the salvation of sinners. So what that means is he loved sinners so much he was willing to sacrifice his life. He didn't love his life all the way to death.
Yep.
Similarly, by the way, Luke 14, Jesus makes this really weird statement. In Luke chapter 14, he says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father, mother, brother, sister, wife, children, lands, and even his own life, he says he's not fit to be my disciple. Which is a very weird thing to say because, of course, we're Christians. We're supposed to love our father, mother, brother, sisters, right? Like, that doesn't make much sense. Why would he say not only are you supposed to hate them, but you're supposed to hate everything, right, for the sake of the gospel? You cannot follow Jesus, he's saying, if you do not hate all these things. It's a difficult passage, but it's explained in a parallel section in Matthew chapter 10, which is teaching the same thing. He just words it differently. In Matthew 10, he says, if anyone comes to me and loves father, sister, brother, mother, wife, children, lands, and his own life more than me, then he's not fit for me. So when Luke is saying, if you come to me and don't hate all these things, what he's saying is you have two choices. Are you going to follow your mom or your dad or your wife or your children in what they want and what they expect of you? Or are you going to follow Jesus? Because if you follow Jesus, sometimes, in a sense, you're going to have to sacrifice the opinions and the desires and
no doubt.
Right? I mean, I have a friend, she was an architect, and she became a Christian, and she decided that God was calling her to be a missionary, and her parents don't believe in God, and her parents were embarrassed of that situation, and her parents pleaded with her and tried to beg her not to go into mission work, but to stay in her career path and to stay and be a normal person was kind of the idea. Not that she hates her parents. She loves her parents. In fact, you can't possibly love the Lord if you don't actually love people in general, let alone the people you should love most of all. But she did not love them all the way, or she did not love her own life unto death. You know what I mean? In other words, she was willing to sacrifice all the things she loves for the sake of the Lord. And that's what that verse means.
She disappointed her parents to honor Christ.
She disappointed her parents to honor Christ.
And there's a line that, unto death, you could get really close, but you may say, at this point, that's gone too far.
Yeah.
These people said, there is no line.
Yeah.
I will always choose Christ, even at the sword.
Yeah. And that's the same thing here. These martyrs, right? These martyrs are like, I'm going to die rather than.
Yeah.
And by the way, and I think this is in Hebrews 12. I might be wrong on this. But that same part that talks about Jesus choosing the joy set before him, it says, look to him.
Looking unto Jesus, the
author and finisher of our faith. And then it compares it to us. It says, for we have not yet resisted against sin unto bloodshed. What that means is every time we sin, what are we choosing? Ourselves. Every time we sin, we're loving ourselves over Jesus every single time. And why are we forsaking Jesus in every sin? because I just like this thing too much. So we're choosing self over Jesus. And so what's happening is we're loving our life. We're loving our life. And so what he's saying is the martyr, what has the martyr accomplished? He's finally figured out how to love Jesus more than his life all the way to the point of death. Because the converse of what I just said is every time I choose not to sin, I'm choosing Jesus because I love him more than my sin. And if I'm facing death and I choose to die for the sake of Jesus, then I have loved him all the way to death and have forsaken my life.
And of course, ironically, he says, is it bad to love your own life? Actually, this is the best possible thing you could do if you truly love your own life.
Yeah.
Because if you lose your life for my sake, it is then that you will find it.
Exactly. Yes.
So they actually do love their life by not loving it, in a
Correct.
sense,
Yeah.
which is
And
welcome.
and there's the converse of what Jesus says with that too.
Yeah.
If you lose your life for my sake, you will find it. But if you seek your life, you will lose it.
Which is also true.
Both are true.
If you denounce Christ to try to gain another 5-10 years on earth, you will lose your life.
Yep.
It may not be at the sword. It may not be because of martyrdom, but you will die.
Which, by the way, I want to address kind of like a pop psychology thing in our culture that I don't like. And it's a call to people to love themselves. There's this thing that a lot of people say, you need to stop and love yourself. Now, here's the thing. That is true. I don't think that's necessarily false. I think in one sense, there is a sense in which we have to love ourselves. However, it's also not the correct focus. Loving yourself means doing what is best for yourself, because love always means doing what is best. Doing what is best, like to truly love another person means you do what is best for them at cost to yourself.
And it includes suffering.
And it includes suffering. And loving yourself
Includes suffering.
means doing what is best, not what you want.
Yes.
And the problem is so often when people sit there and say, you need to love yourself, what they mean by it is you need to take your focus off of other people and off of and put it on yourself and fulfill the wants that you have. And oftentimes, guys, those are I said guys, but I'm looking at you guys. Oftentimes those are the very things that will destroy us. And what we're doing is we're actually hating ourselves by doing those things.
Yeah.
We really need to get at the heart of what is good. That's what we need to get at heart. What is good for others and for myself, not what I desire and what I want. So anyway.
Yeah, in fact, loving yourself to the point of giving yourself everything that the self seems to want in the moment all the time will kill you very quickly.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, it'll
Yes.
it'll balloon your body. It'll empty your bank account.
Yep.
It will ruin your friendships.
Yep.
And loving yourself will be the death of you.
It will.
But suffering will actually be the life of you.
Yeah. It's the weird conundrum. He who seeks his life shall lose it. He who loses his life for my sake and for the gospel's will find it.
Well, that is great show, everybody. That's how you end it right there.
Although
isn't
we're
it?
not done. So
No?
stay tuned.
Okay, stay tuned. All right, part 2. Welcome back. We have Jeff. If the devil is a critic and critics are necessary, is it correct to infer the devil is necessary? That seems wrong. Where is this wrong?
I think he's necessary.
Well, first,
Well, I had to answer that real quick.
yeah,
I
of
just
course.
dropped
Yeah,
that.
like, boom.
I do think he's necessary.
Yeah.
But go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to say this is a question that's rooted in an interesting introduction to last night, which is the need for the critic.
Yeah.
The need to actually be corrected,
Yeah.
or the need to have something, in a sense, challenged. Which, if you didn't watch the teachings, some great Superman references and plot lines developed through criticism to make it better.
Yeah.
And then you say, well, this is it. This is the character he plays. But Jeff is asking some really great questions.
Really good. Those are really great questions.
Question 1 and 2 are the same
Yeah.
in nature, to say not loving yourself seems wrong, and having the devil as a necessary character in the way that the storyline of humanity is playing out also seems wrong.
Yeah.
But criticism is good. And if he plays that role, then is he good and is he necessary? And you say, you're darn right he is. Explain, boy.
Okay, so let me. Yeah, so it is a really good question, and I want to approach this from two ends, really. The first end is I just want to focus on a couple of scriptures. The first one being Ephesians chapter 1, verse 11. In Ephesians chapter 1, verse 11, it says, God works all things according to the counsel of his will. All things according to the counsel of his will. Now, this is a tricky thing, and I don't know that I fully understand it. But what I take that to mean is that everything that exists in this world and every kind of event that happens, it's not that he wants them all to happen, and it's not that they're all intrinsically good. It's not that they're all in and of themselves good. But what it does mean is that every single thing that happens and every single being that is in this world is ultimately a part of God's sovereign plan. And he is using all of these things to accomplish his intended end, right? God is like the world as it's unfolding is not an accident. It is true that there are other beings with free will who have chosen to rebel against God. We are amongst them. Humanity chose to eat of the fruit and they turned on God. The devil chose to rebel against God, right? Those things are bad. But God is all powerful, all knowing. He knew everything before it happened, and he had the ability to make whatever choice he wanted to. He could have chosen not to create. He could have chosen to create and not give a choice. He could have made Adam and Eve and decided not to put a tree in the garden. But the fact that he did put the tree in the garden, the fact that he did create the devil, all of those things indicate that he knew, knowing fully what was going to happen, he chose to create anyway. And what that means is it is all ultimately a part of the plan. And I would just add Romans 8:28, one of the most commonly quoted verses, rightfully so, and God, we know this, that God works all things together for good for those who love him, for those who are called according to his purpose. So even the bad things, even the devil. So this is not me saying that the devil is good. That's not the case. He's bad. He's very bad. But it is to say that nonetheless, God is going to take him and the wickedness that he does, and he's going to bring good out of it. We covered Joseph a while back in the book of
Genesis chapter 50.
Joseph was taken by his brothers. He was sold into slavery. Joseph went and as a slave did well, succeeded. Things looked kind of positive. And then he's falsely accused of trying to rape his master's wife. So he goes to prison. All of those things are bad, 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 bad. And when his brothers finally come to him at the end, when now things are good, now he's the second in charge of all of Egypt. He is the king, right? Or not the king. He is second in command to the king. And his brothers come and they realize who he is. When they first realize who he is, they're terrified because they're like, oh my gosh, he's going to take us and throw us into prison. But the reality is, what Joseph says is, what you intended for me, you intended for bad. But God has used it for good and brought about that many lives would be saved. I have no doubt that the devil is a part of that process. And when I used the critic metaphor, I was just kind of showing one way in which we can understand the devil as a part of this process. This is very important to me because people are very afraid of the devil at times, and rightfully so. I mean, the book of Jude tells us that not even Michael the archangel brought a railing accusation against the devil. Like, he is something to fear. But he's something to fear like at a natural level, meaning the same way, like we might fear a lion or a bear or something like that. He is not something to fear at all in the context of God and his sovereignty. Because the devil is not, like in some weird sense, the opposite of God.
Right.
Right? It's not like you have God and he's like, man, I'm working really hard. I just can't wait to beat the devil. I'm trying. We'll hopefully get him one of these days. I brought this up before in my teaching, but in the book Paradise Lost, when it describes the war between Michael and the dragon, between Michael and Satan, as they're fighting, it describes it as a war. It describes it as back and forth, right? At one point, Michael and his angels are winning. At the next point, the devil and his angels are winning. But at a certain point in the battle, all of a sudden it says that the Son of God comes into the battle and he breathes and the angels fall to the earth. Or the devils fall to the earth. The point being, all God needs to do is breathe. All he needs to do is speak. He can speak the word right now and the devil will cease to exist. So that tells me he has a purpose and a reason for letting him remain. I don't know exactly what that is, but this idea of the criticism metaphor, what I like about it is it helps us to understand that a part of life, a part of like and that happens, by the way, this is true at an individual level, like for you and me as individuals, but also I think throughout history, a part of humanity and human beings individually, of our lives and our progress and growth and becoming who we're meant to be, is pain, suffering, difficulty, and conquering evil. Like, that's a part of it. And to not have that to not have that in the state that we're currently in with the bodies that we currently have would be bad. And we can see this. America is a very unhappy place. And it seems like we're getting increasingly unhappier.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we're like things are getting easier. We're doing everything in our power to eliminate the criticism section, right? And we're being really successful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the psychology of this is very clear. There's no question. A life without struggle and hardship and difficulty is very destructive in the life of a person.
Mm-hmm.
Like we need those things. And so we need Satan in that sense.
I heard a quote. It may be Nietzsche, but I can't remember who. But it essentially said, "The only thing that the wealthy cannot give their children is suffering."
Yeah,
and it will be the only thing they want.
Yeah,
and we see that.
We see it,
and we're a wealthy nation with wealthy kids and wealthy generation, and we are watching for the first generation of all time, they've never had mass suffering.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of manufactured, not to say that this is true of everyone, but people are longing for a challenge to overcome, a longing for it.
Yeah.
And like you said, it seems to be part of the human condition to overcome.
Yep.
And the criticism, the suffering of pain, and whatever the dominion of evil is part of the overcoming.
Yeah.
And it's part of the victory, the reward,
Yeah.
Whatever the overcomers is part of this
Yeah.
theme of this book will be those who overcome.
Yeah.
And there has to be an enemy to overcome.
Yeah.
And it's
Has to
part
be.
of the human will
Yeah.
to find victory in the face of an enemy.
Yeah.
Whether it's the flesh, the world, or the devil.
Yeah. So therefore, in that sense, he's necessary. I mean, not good. He's bad, but he's necessary.
And to Jeff and to all people who wonder, man, wouldn't it be easier if he wasn't around? Here's the fact. In Christ, you will be victorious.
Yeah.
So it's not he's a necessary evil that is a coin toss.
Yeah. No.
He is a adversary that will be overcome for all who believe.
In some ways, and this is partly what I think the book of Revelation is talking about, is overcome, has already been overcome.
Correct.
Right? He breathes and the devil falls to the ground. I mean, that's actually really, I think, the force of chapter 11 when it was talking about the war between the dragon and Michael. The dragon has been defeated. And where is he? He is here, and he's going into destruction. He's going to end, and he's trying to take everybody he can with him. That's where he's at. He's at that point. He's like, he's Hitler in the bunker.
Which I was going to reference. You know, the Hitler metaphor of the week, because there's always a Hitler metaphor.
Have I done a lot of Hitler?
No, but for just people.
Yeah,
he has
true.
personified evil in our day.
Yeah.
But very rarely, I mean, if ever, does that Hitler metaphor come out, which is Hitler is also a symbol of someone with an inevitable defeat.
Yeah.
That would rather take everyone down with him than wave a white flag of surrender.
Yeah.
And I mean, in some ways, look around. There are all sorts of ways that symbol plays out.
Yeah.
An inevitable defeat where people would, rather than admit loss and surrender, they would rather just drag everyone down with them.
Yep.
And I loved that picture of what is already happening in the spiritual realm.
Yep.
It's an inevitable defeat.
Yeah.
The victory is already won.
Yep.
The only question now is how many people will be dragged down with the sinking ship of the demonic realm.
Yeah. Yep.
We love you, Jeff.
Yep.
Jeff, keep the questions. Can I ask a question of you? Jeff's asked a question. Will you answer it?
Yeah.
Done. Jeff, keep asking questions, brother. Let's ask 3 in a row by Sarah, and I'm going to start here at the bottom.
Yeah.
We've got 3 questions, and they all have a theme about them, and you'll hear it in question number 1 from Sarah Smith. Great name.
By the way, Sarah Smith, great divorce.
That's correct.
It's Sarah Smith from
Sarah
Great
Smith
Divorce.
is the hero of heaven.
Which she's referencing here. I wonder if this is...
Wait a second.
Wait a minute.
Is this...
Is Sarah Smith here used as a metaphor? Or is this actually Sarah Smith?
If this is a pen name, because she's going to ask us questions about heaven without using the Great Divorce.
Yeah, she says, don't reference C.S. Lewis.
Wow. And then she says the name, he or she at this point, because Sarah Smith is the hero of heaven that no one knew on earth.
Sarah, you have to tell us whether or not you're actually Sarah Smith or if this is a metaphor. So we
sorry to mention Great Divorce. I know that was out of
that's
bounds.
actually, it says here we can't do that. So
but
that's the one
but
time
the
we'll
name,
reference it. Yeah.
But the name,
yeah.
Sarah Smith.
For those of you guys who don't know what we're talking about, Sarah Smith is a character in C.S. Lewis's book, The Great Divorce,
All about heaven.
which is about heaven. It's actually about a bunch of people in hell.
Oh shoot, we're doing it.
Taking a plane.
Matt, bleep all of this out.
No, you got to leave it in. We're just explaining, Sarah.
Bleep.
It's just to explain, to set up context. Taking a bus ride to heaven, and there's a woman there named Sarah Smith who is honored in front of everyone as one of the great people in human history.
She was a parade.
It's actually one of the most
and
beautiful.
all of these people come around her because she influenced their life, and their citizenship in heaven was in some ways won by her.
Yeah.
But and then they got animals all around her. She was like caring for everyone she touched on earth.
Now,
and then remember the person says, "Who is this great hero?" He goes, you wouldn't even know her on earth. Her name was Sarah Smith.
Yeah.
You wouldn't know her.
Now,
because on earth, the glory that and the treasures you have in heaven very rarely translate to the glory and treasure you have on earth.
Yeah. And by the way, incredibly clever if you're using the name Sarah Smith as like an alias. But on the flip side, you absolutely could be named Sarah Smith. Like,
that's a total valid name.
That's a very
it's a great name.
It's a common name, right?
Yeah.
So anyway.
We'd love to know.
Yeah.
Matt, can you respond to Sarah Smith's questions and find out? So,
okay.
You're going to the coast? Okay, when you get back.
One of these days we're going to get Matt to talk. Because sometimes they talk, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So we got to get Matt
rarely.
talking.
Yeah.
One of these days,
Season
Matt,
2.
I don't know
Season
how,
two.
but I'm going to get you.
Season 2.
I'm going to get you.
Many descriptions of heaven seem to come from Revelation. Since so much of Revelation is symbolic, does it actually tell us anything about what heaven looks like?
I think no. Meaning, I don't think that the book of Revelation actually gives us a picture. If what we mean is visible imagery of what heaven actually physically looks like, I don't think the book of Revelation actually does that. I think what we see is symbolic. Things like the idea of streets paved with gold. I think that is symbolic imagery. And I mean, I've heard many commentators say this makes perfect sense. The idea of streets paved with gold is the idea that like in our world, what paves streets? Well, when this was written, streets were mostly dirt. And if they were well constructed, they were constructed with gravel and stone, right? And so things that aren't valuable. So the idea is that in heaven, what is beautiful and valuable on earth is going to be like rubble and like dirt.
I want to answer just for fun.
Okay, go for it.
I think yes.
Okay, that's fine.
And then we'll.
By the way, we can disagree.
Yeah, no, of course. And then but I think we'll both kind of come to a conclusion that we're both answering in part.
Okay.
Of course. And then, but we'll come back to both these questions for the third part of her question when she asks us to describe what heaven is like, because what you just did is kind of answer question 3. Yeah. But you said, but I don't think that's what heaven's like. That's just a metaphor for how glorious heaven will be. But let's get to question 2, because we've both given previews.
Yeah.
Not really, and I'm just going to, as a contrary, say, yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
And so, but question 2, will there really be pearly gates, streets of gold, a throne with the multitudes from every nation in white robes, or creatures singing holy, holy continually? So you've given a tell. Will there literally be a pearly gate, streets of gold?
I don't think there'll be pearly gates or streets of gold. Will there be a literal throne? I don't know. That I don't know. I don't know if in the heavenly image they have the throne because it is an image of what we envision with the earthly throne, or vice versa. If we have earthly thrones because from the dawn of time, mankind has had a sense of God elevated on his throne. I'm not sure.
On part 2, and then we'll get to 3. I'll say I hope so. This sounds awesome. I would love there to be streets of gold, and I'm in some ways it pays off to be a literalist sometimes, to be like gold streets, and then when I meet the Lord face to face and there's something else, I'll be like, "Hey, great surprise! You had me. I believed you for gold, and that's okay if it's something else."
Can I qualify this a little bit?
Yeah.
Let me say, and I hope you guys understand, because I often think this gets confusing in listening to discourse, and sometimes I can forget that I need to qualify this. Could all those things be there in heaven? Absolutely. Yes. Let me qualify. Could there be literal streets of gold? Yes. Could there be literal pearly gates? Yes. But because I think this is supposed to be symbolic, I don't think it needs to actually be there, and it will still be true. Well, does that make sense?
Yes. And before we get to point 3, just to ask you a personal question as a man.
Yeah.
Will there even be streets? Because if there's streets, mine are going to be gold. What are yours made of?
Well, I will tell you one thing I don't believe in heaven. I don't believe I don't believe heaven is a place, because this is the way people think of it,
Yeah.
that heaven is a place that we create. That is, that we make it what we want it. That I believe is not
Wrong.
true. That's wrong. And so if there are streets of gold, it is because there are in fact streets of gold that God has decreed. And if there aren't, it's because there are in fact not streets of gold that God has decreed.
Cool.
And so I'm totally open to there being streets of gold, but the one thing I'm committed to is it must be from God himself, right?
So now comes to, and really we should have just,
Can I add, by the way, yes, there will be, though, literally, for sure, multitudes from every nation there, for sure.
Absolutely.
Will they be literally wearing white robes? Don't know. But
they are in
the white robes are symbols, though.
Yeah, they
the
are.
symbols of white robes we know because they tell us it is the righteous acts of the saints.
Yeah.
So it's the Book of Revelation actually tells us what the white robes are. These people who are standing there in their white robes, these are people who are covered in the white or in the righteous deeds of the saints, which also the Book of Revelation tells us these deeds were washed in the blood of the Lamb, right? So in other words, these people have done great, mighty, and righteous things, but they've only done so by the power of Jesus. Amen. Because of what he'd done. That's what the symbolism means. Will we literally be wearing white robes? Maybe, but I don't think we're committed to that because the symbol is the point.
Amen. I'm actually going to go first on description of heaven because
Okay.
mine's probably much shorter than yours because you're so smart.
Mine's
and
pretty short.
Mine's very short.
Mine's even shorter.
But I do want to.
Because yours is physical.
Hey, I do want to ask on behalf of Sarah Smith
Yeah.
and George McDonald.
George McDonald is a character in Great Divorce. We got to stop bringing up Great Divorce.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Had she not prefaced Great Divorce is off limits, would you have gone there? Would you have said like,
it's a
C.S.
good
Lewis says
question.
it this way, which
Yeah.
because I thought of it with the robes of white because he actually mentions some wearing robes, some wearing nothing at all.
Yeah. No, I would not. I wouldn't
Okay.
have. I would not have used those. In my mind, the book, The Great Divorce, is equally symbolic. It's not. It's
and
not
it's answering
literal.
a different question. It's
Yeah,
not
it's answering-
trying to answer the question, that Casting Crowns so beautifully put in all of our minds.
Yeah.
I can only imagine
Yeah,
and what the imagination could turn into.
Yeah.
But it's answering a question of why do some people reject the invitation of heaven?
Yeah.
But we're not going to mention that.
Yeah. Yep.
So, will you both describe what you think heaven is like? I think, principally, as I begin to answer this question, there are a few ways that we can begin to imagine what heaven is like. One is that we have seen the resurrected Christ as a preview to heaven. And the resurrected Christ, 2 times, we get a preview of heaven, one in the Transfiguration. And in the Transfiguration, he is actually wearing white.
Okay,
And
that's
he's-
a fair
And,
point.
and his glory shining out of him,
Yeah.
but he's still a man.
Yeah.
He's still in a, as Paul would say, a terrestrial body,
Yeah.
but now with celestial glory.
Yeah.
The second time we see the heavenly man in his glory is post-resurrection. He's still a man, but he's a different man.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's a man that the disciples cannot recognize. They know he's a man,
Yeah.
and he has heavenly power in a sense.
Yeah.
Famously, he
Walks
can,
through walls.
he no longer needs streets because he can be anywhere he wants without having to deal with the space-time continuum,
Yep.
if I may. Now, why do I mention that? Because when Revelation says new heaven and new earth, what they're saying is, in some ways, what Paul says. There's a seed that we know. It's the same thing, and it comes out more glorious, but it's the same thing. What we know of earth now, we know in part. Heaven will be the glory of earth. So do I think that earth is a preview of heaven? In some ways I do. I think heaven will be the most glorious version of earth we could ever imagine.
Yeah.
The new heavens and the new earth will be the equivalent of the transfiguration of Christ on the mountaintop for earth. So, and that runs into all of the earthly relationships. So me and you will have a heavenly relationship that knows no division.
Yeah.
You and I in heaven will be closer than my closest
We'll
moment
play backgammon.
with my wife. No, we won't play backgammon because that won't be in heaven. But that's a sidebar. My wife and I have the closest relationship I have on earth. It will not match your and I's relationship in heaven.
Yeah.
Because our friendship is a preview of the perfect friendship of heaven.
Yeah.
So everything you love about earth will be perfected in heaven.
Yeah.
And the new heavens and the new earth, including, I think, waterfalls and mountains and grass and all of God's creation and all the animals that have ever lived, but in all of their glory, will be, in a sense, transfigured to shine so bright that the earthly remembrance of them will be but a shadow. And the new heaven and the new earth. So when you ask, what is heaven going to be like? It's like now, except perfect. So everything that's imperfect in earth will have been solved, and there will be no more pain, suffering, or sorrow, and all of this creation will now be perfect.
Yeah.
So what is your description?
I agree 100%.
Okay.
Okay. Well, no, I'll say a little bit more. No, I agree 100%. And in fact, you brought up something that I think is really important that I did want to make sure to convey as part of this question. We got to remember, Christians talk about going to heaven, right? Like when we die, we go to heaven. That is true during this part of human history. When we die, our bodies get buried, our souls go to be in the presence of the Lord. However, when everything comes to an end, when the final seal is finally opened 100%, when the final trumpet is blown, using all these Revelation metaphors, when the end comes, when the end of the world finally actually comes, the world that we currently stand on and the heavens that exist. And by the way, people often misunderstand. In the Bible, most often, almost always, when it uses the word heaven, it's talking about the sky, where the sun, the moon, and the stars are. It's rarely talking about the place where God is enthroned. That's rarely the term used for heaven. So when it speaks of a new heaven and a new earth, what's going to happen is this heaven and this earth, meaning the universe that we see when we look out at the night sky and the earth we stand on, is going to be destroyed. With fire. Peter describes it's going to be burnt up with fire that is going to burn the very elements that compose it. And then what's going to
it's not coming from car emissions, I'll tell you
it's
that.
not coming from, yeah. Well, and then it's going to be created into a new heaven and a new earth. A new heaven, not a new throne room of God, not a new presence of God. A new heaven meaning new sun, new moon, new stars, new universe, and a new planet Earth that we're going to stand on. And this is going to be, I love the choice of your word. Or the word you chose. I don't know that I would have thought to use it. It's going to be transfigured. And it does relate to that passage in 1 Corinthians 15 when it talks about the seed. You know, Paul is asking the question, what kind of bodies will we be resurrected with? And he says, and he's addressing people who think resurrection is impossible. So they're like, what kind of a body are you going to come up with? Come on,
yeah.
Your body's going to decompose
Yeah.
and you can't resurrect.
Yeah.
And he says, foolish one, don't you know that something cannot actually live unless it has first died? And he talks about a seed. He says, when you plant a seed, it's one kind of thing. You cover it up, but eventually something else grows out of it entirely, right? The plant that grows from the seed doesn't look anything at all like the old seed. And he says, so too with our new bodies. 1 Corinthians 15, it's all there. So too with our new bodies. The body that comes up is, and you use this term, it's a spiritual body. It's sown a natural body, but it's resurrected as a spiritual body. And I think 100% that's what happens to the earth and to the heavens. That there is some way, in the same way that our spiritual body, our new body, is going to grow in some sense out of this old one and have an element of the old. So too the planet Earth is going to grow out and have an element of the old. And so I don't know exactly what that would mean. Like, I envision what you described, earth, waterfalls and all that kind of stuff. But I don't know. I mean, but I'm assuming because that's what this world is.
It's a preview of what's to come. Now we see in part, then we will see in full. Now we see in part is key.
Correct.
Look around. All of this is a tiny seed of what's actually coming.
You know, she says don't reference C.S. Lewis, but I kind of need to.
Well, maybe there's a.
Do I get can I have a little? Can I?
Matt just thumbs up like a Caesar. Matt, thumbs up or thumbs down. Should he reference?
Sarah, will you forgive me if I reference it? Because I'm assuming Sarah, because
you think of the blades of grass that are like they.
Here's the thing. Sarah said, "Do not reference C.S. Lewis." I'm only doing it because it popped in my head.
Okay.
And I can't. Well, okay, I better.
Yeah.
Not. I'm not going to. I'll do it next time.
Okay.
Because we didn't this time, so I'm not going to reference it. Let me say two more things that I'm certain about with the resurrection, with the new heavens and the new earth. Number one, God is there.
Yes.
That's the big thing.
Yep.
And again, like
He will be our God. We will be His people.
Yep.
He will dwell among us.
And here's the thing. It harkens back to the book of Genesis. In Eden, what is happening? And that also could be an image, by the way, of what the new earth might be like.
Correct.
Right? They're in Eden, in the garden of God. And what does it say? God walked with them in the coolness of the day.
Yeah.
At the end of the book, at the end of Revelation, it says, They don't need a sun or a moon or stars because the Lord God lives with them and he will be their light.
Yes.
Right? So the point is that God himself will be present. And that's the most important thing. We will be in his presence. And secondly, I do believe that heaven or the resurrection, the eternity will be an eternity of worshiping God. I don't know I don't necessarily think that means we're just going to be singing all the time, because a lot of people assume that singing is worship. I don't think that's necessarily true. Singing is an expression of worship. Worship exists wherever we bow before God and give of ourselves. And so what will heaven be? Heaven will be perpetually us, not, how did that question go? Loving ourselves.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
It's going to be always us giving of ourselves and loving him and worshiping him, however that looks.
Yep.
So
which is interesting, because these questions almost, when you bring it back to Eden, they almost connect with the necessary character of Satan, because I don't believe that Adam was transfigured.
Yeah.
I believe Adam was a man.
I agree.
And the only way you can experience transfiguration is through death.
Yeah.
And so you think of that word where it says that God planted man in a garden.
Yep.
And the thing that was required for him to experience the actual fullness of Adam, he had to die.
Yeah.
And he couldn't die until Satan came.
Yeah.
He had to go through, within humanity, you have to go through death to actually get to heaven. And the last thing I'll say is, it's so good to think about heaven.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we, when you said God versus Satan, and it's like this battle, earth versus heaven, it's like, I don't know, earth is pretty cool. My current life is pretty great. We need to be more heavenly minded.
Yeah.
It is really hard to not love your life even unto death when you think that heaven and earth are in competition. They're not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the most important part
Yeah.
of things like Streets of Gold.
Yeah.
It's not a competition. Heaven and earth are completely different worlds.
Yep.
And for believers who live their life on earth like heaven is real, they're a different kind of people. I think of some people that we know, but we'll continue on. Okay.
We got a few more. I think we can go through these pretty quickly.
Well, I don't know we'll get to all of these questions. What say you? Should we save some of these for bonus questions another time?
Yeah.
Should we?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let's do what we can, though.
Okay, let's do what we can. We're racing against the clock. Even if we only have to throw out one or two questions, that'll be fine. Not throw them out, but hold them for another time. Nadine.
Nadine. Hi, Nadine.
Nadine. Shout out to Nadine. Also want to do a shout out to Patrick in Garden Valley. Faithful listener. And just he actually got to come from Garden Valley down to the service. And just, how are you doing, Patrick?
Hi, Patrick.
Nadine says, my New King James Version Bible capitalizes child in Revelation chapter 12, verses 4 through 5. Does that mean that the translators believe the idea that the child is Jesus?
Correct. Yeah, that's really good, Nadine. They capitalized it because the translators made the choice to interpret the child as Jesus as opposed to one of the other possible translations. So for those of you guys who don't recall, because this is a couple weeks ago, this is speaking of the woman who's described in Revelation chapter 12, who has the crown of stars and all of those things. She gives birth to a child, and that child will ultimately be caught up into heaven. And most commentators believe that child is Jesus. I pointed out that there is a reading which takes him to be the church, potentially, or something like that. That is way less common. But yes, they interpreted it to be Jesus. But I do want to add, and this is important to note, in the original languages, so when the New Testament was first written, Old Testament as well, when the New Testament was first written, there were no lowercase letters. All letters were capitalized. So when this was first written, you would have not capitalized a word.
Correct.
As one word as opposed to another. So therefore, the choice to capitalize came later when people decided that we should honor God by always capitalizing his name or his pronouns.
And you said the
like
original language only had lowercase?
No, only had capitals.
That's the way to put it.
Did I say lowercase?
No, it could go either way. I mean, if there's no capitals, there's no lowercase. It's really just a question of pessimism and optimism. I'm more of an uppercase guy.
It's all one font, right?
Just one font.
Yeah.
It could be small or big. I'm glad that it's a half full for you. Half full for me, too. Last question in the speed round.
No, let's do 3. We can do these next 3. They're short.
Okay, quick ones. The last one's going to be a triple bonus. But what is glory? What is God's glory? Please describe and explain. Just a quick explanation of the glory of God.
There are two different definitions of the word glory. And I think both of them are used in Scripture. One, glory is brightness or shiningness, right? So Paul does this in 1 Corinthians 15 when he talks about the bodies. Just so what we just talked about, how the glory of the spiritual body is going to be different from the glory of the earthly body. Mm-hmm. And then he uses a metaphor. He says, look at the heavenly bodies. He goes, not all bodies have the same glory.
Correct.
He says there's one glory of the moon, but there's a whole other glory of the sun. And what he means by that is the moon is bright, but the sun is way brighter. Yeah. And stars have their own glory, meaning they have their own degree of brightness, and some stars are brighter than others. So that's what he's using. So that's the simple meaning of glory. And then when we talk about the glory of God that way, then it is literally speaking of the brightness that shines from his throne. I do think much of the time when it's used that way, it is kind of metaphoric or symbolic. It's speaking there of the way that his presence overpowers and dominates and spreads. Now that gets to, metaphorically, the second meaning of glory. And how this is often used this way in the Scriptures as well. And the second meaning is fame or recognition. So glory would be to, like Michael Jordan is glorified.
Well, and the perfect metaphor, because this weekend, which without being biblical at all, they're using both, because the NBA is using the All-Star weekend. Now we think of All-Star, but they're stars. There's some players that are earthly players, and then there are some that shine like stars.
Exactly.
And they're the All-Stars.
They're the All-Stars.
Yeah.
That's right. And so, like, Michael Jordan is the ultimate or was. I mean, maybe LeBron competes with. I know you're not so a LeBron.
Silly.
You're not.
He's got his place, but
where does he rank?
Oh, LeBron James
all time
in the pantheon of the NBA. He's easily a top 10 player.
I knew you'd go top 10.
Top 10 is fair. That's so fair.
He's clearly top 5.
Okay, top 5. I mean, we can talk about it, as long as he's nowhere near Michael Jordan.
I think he's near Michael Jordan.
Yeah, well, this isn't. We'll have to have. We'll have to have Wrestling Mask Chad on to talk about that.
So all this to say, though, somebody like Michael Jordan or LeBron, they have glory.
Jordan.
Well, both of them. They both have glory. Because now the question is who has more glory?
That's not a question.
But the point is that that's fame.
Yeah.
So, and to be honest, even talking about glory, it's not really about who's better. It's about who's more famous. Mm-hmm. And I think you could argue right now, LeBron might have more glory. I don't know. I might be wrong on that. Worldwide, who is better known, LeBron James or Michael Jordan? I don't know. Because that's what glory means. And you spread fame by telling people about them, or by doing things to elevate. Like, here's another metaphor: elevating somebody. Because if they go higher, as they go higher, then more people can see them.
Yeah.
Right?
So as an example, it's very popular to go into different parts where the NBA is, spreading, and you'll see a mural, a spray paint of the person, and it's like the artist is sharing the glory of that person's picture with whoever passes by that mural.
Correct. Yeah. And so the thing is that when we glorify God, what that means is we're spreading his fame, meaning we're letting people know about him. And every time we're obedient to him, and every time we honor him, and we do something that makes somebody like astonished at who that person is, that what's happening is we're glorifying God. Like, people see this person. And I think about Paul when he stands in the book of Acts, he goes and testifies before that King Agrippa. Do you remember? I'm sorry. This is a weird psychological thing where I'm talking to you or I'm
right
talking
behind me.
He's behind me.
Matt?
Yes.
What are you talking about?
You've looked this way the whole time and everybody knows it. Anyway, he's talking to King Agrippa and he shares the gospel. And Agrippa, at the end, he goes, "You almost make me want to become a believer."
Right.
That's glorifying God. Because what's happening is there's something about Paul that is winning him over, right? The opposite of glorifying God would be the person who does something horrible that causes somebody to hate God because of what he has done.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, we all have those stories,
right.
And we know people who said, well, I've been in the church, but then somebody made me not believe because they did this horrible thing.
Yep.
So that's the opposite of glorifying God. But we also know those stories of those people who are so loving and so gracious and who make other people. Like, I remember I had a Greek teacher who was actually Eastern Orthodox. But he was a Greek teacher. And I remember I had a friend who was in that class, and she was an atheist. But she and I were walking, and she was speaking of this guy, and she said, he's just so beautiful. Now, she didn't mean physically. She meant like his spirit.
His spirit.
And she goes, I just want to believe whatever he believes. She said that because that's that glory. He's radiating God's glory in that sense to her, right?
Amen.
So,
well, that is as long as I'll allow you to go on a speed round question. Are there dark clouds in heaven?
I don't know the exact answer to that. I mean, like, I don't think dark clouds need to mean sorrow or melancholy or sadness.
I mean, it could be, the question could also be said, is there rain in heaven?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. And my inclination would think there probably is, based on what we described earlier,
Right.
because the new heaven, new earth, natural things,
Right.
rain isn't bad. Rain is good.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, rain is good and beautiful. So my inclination is to think probably yes, but I'm not certain.
Literally, yes. Symbolically, probably not.
Yeah, not symbolically, because symbolically, dark clouds we associate with melancholy and sadness, and that would be.
People have questions, Tom. We're going to end with this one.
Okay.
People have questions. The last episode, you said something fairly provocative. Left myself. We left the studio, and I had questions. And you mentioned your students at your school can't wear sweaters. It doesn't matter how cold it is. The kids can't. Let the kids wear sweaters, Tom. Why? So the question is from Anonymous, why can't kids at your school, students at your school, wear sweaters?
So I forgot that I mentioned that.
Yeah.
And I thought this question was from a student. I thought they sent it in to mess with me when I first saw it. And then you reminded me of me saying that. The answer is we have uniforms, and you can't wear anything that's not the uniform.
Right.
And there's not a sweater component to the uniform.
Okay.
That's the answer.
Okay.
They do have jackets.
Yep.
Right. So they don't have. They
They get home. They're now at home. They throw a sweater on.
Sweaters at home. Yep.
Boom. Everybody's happy. Everybody's happy.
Yeah.
Kids, put your sweaters on at home.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Just like a lot of things that aren't allowed in school, you know? Can
Yeah.
they chew gum?
No.
They can't chew gum. Put it on. Chew the gum at home with your sweater.
Chew the home sweater.
You could do that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I hope we solve some tension points between you and your students. I think overall they love you, but you know, every once in a while it's drafty. Consider maybe some blanket option for the kids, you know, where they could put it over their shoulders like a shawl just to stay warm. That's all I think that's all they want. Thank you guys always for watching. If you at all, hope you have a great day, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah. See you guys next time.
Great job, buddy.
Likewise.